Well, okay. I think we might have started to talk about this before, but I wanted to see what you thought about this question. What stories or story do you carry around with you? That seems like a good thing to kind of reflect on.
Mm. Yeah, I think I told you before that question was difficult for me. Um, because I feel like I don't really have much of a story or an interesting one. Um, but do you
Is
mean
there
like
no,
what story as like who I am and things like that?
just what do you, when reflecting on yourself, do you see as kind of important to you? You know, what kind of brings out emotion in a strong way, or what is one that you'd want to keep repeating? I don't know, things like that.
Mm. Well, when I think of stories, I just think of a lot of what I have to do and things like that. So I kind of think like I have to like I'm part of a family and then I have to like take care of everyone as I get older.
Sounds
Um,
like duties,
yeah, yeah, I think a
virtues,
lot about
maybe. But
duties, what I have to do, things like that. So yeah, one thing that's I always keep telling myself is, oh, I'll have to yeah, I grew up in this family and just like they've taken care of me, like I have to take care of them in the future. So that's on my mind a lot.
yeah,
Uh,
reciprocation is, I
yeah,
think, one of the biggest bases of human
yeah,
interaction.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that's a kind of one, I guess, story I've made up in my mind. What I have to do.
And there's certainly stories that talk about filial piety and duty and things like that. Can you think of any? I mean, the
Um,
first thing that occurs is Cinderella, but that's like a little bit where, well, I guess Cinderella is about kind of filial piety. I mean,
mhm,
she gets rewarded even though she's treated badly, and people
mhm,
conspire to not give her her reward
mhm,
for being the good daughter. But
mhm.
anyway, yeah, were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna see if I had thoughts on Cinderella, but it escapes me right now.
But are there any stories that occur to you that may have moved you as a child about
Uh,
dutiful children?
oh yeah, I think I've told you I like that Mulan movie a lot, that Disney movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Although she kind of
so
went, didn't she kind of go against her family?
yeah, but it was because she saw that her dad was elderly and kind of sick. And during the movie, there was like the emperor sent out a decree that all males of the family, one male from each family, has to go to battle against the
Oh,
Mongols.
in place
So
of her father.
yeah, so there were no sons in her family. So her father had to go, but she saw his condition and didn't want to put him through that. So she stole his armor and pretended to be a man to go, like to protect him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she substituted herself for him. Oh, I didn't know that part of the
yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I think that movie is a good example of that.
I
Yeah.
suppose you saw the old Milan. I don't know if you've seen the new one. I haven't seen either, I think.
Uh yeah, I haven't seen the new one. No, I'm not so sure I heard good things about it, so I've kind of left it alone.
Yeah, I haven't
Um,
seen it. I've only seen like a negative review of it online, so kind of what is it? She's like a Mary Jane or something.
mm,
Like she
mm,
gets all her, I don't know if this is the right use of that term, but she gets all her superpower. She gets sort of
mm,
all her powers without any
mm,
struggle whatsoever
mm,
and immediately or something like
mm,
that.
yeah,
There's no sort of training period and difficulty and no humbling kind of part of the
mm,
journey.
yeah,
There's no hero's journey. It's just like
mm,
she's bestowed with everything at the very beginning.
mm. But yeah, it's like I think that movie maybe planted a little thought in my head that like in some lot of stories kind of when it comes to filial piety kind of involves sacrifice. Um so yeah,
Yeah, which makes sense. Just,
yeah.
I mean, if it's based on reciprocation, one's parents sacrifice for the child. They
Hmm.
sacrifice a certain, time, physical health, opportunity cost. They could
Hmm.
be, out doing more fun stuff or something like that,
Hmm.
quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah. So like when there's a sacrifice, you're kind of obligated to kind of pay it back in a way once you're able to.
But
And
don't you
then
think
that's
many
your
children don't feel that way now?
I no, it's like I kind of think maybe it's part of the process of maturing. Like when you're younger, I think it's understandable that maybe you don't see the sacrifice or pay much attention to it. But
Certainly when you're very young,
yeah,
but I mean more like like young grown children.
um, I don't know. I guess maybe we're talking about just like the general change in culture now. I do think there's like more selfishness or less of maybe like importance placed on family. Uh, so I think in that way, and maybe in a general way, maybe lots of people no longer feel that way. But I still feel though, maybe especially with like immigrant families, there's still that kind of sense around.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a tension like
Mm,
for the kids between like what I absorb from the culture or what I learned there and what like is expected back home, and they assume
mhm,
I've gotten a totally different education because they got the education through their culture,
mhm,
and they didn't consciously sort of necessarily reflect on how that was bestowed on them or infused into them or
mhm,
how to give it to the next generation.
mhm,
You've sometimes talked to me about like the sort of like being, and I've had similar experiences of almost being disparagingly called too American or something like that by your immigrant parent.
uh, yeah, I am experienced that a lot. So yeah, there's yeah, like, they'll have times where my mom will like use the term too liberal or like you're like the people here and things like that. So especially when it comes toward like working towards any kind of independence or doing things outside the family. She'll be like, "Oh, people here are too liberal, and why are you acting that way?" So yeah, there's that kind of sense where even though we grew up here, like we're not supposed to uh be part of the greater culture, even though that's what we grew up around. And then like the traditional culture is kind of just in our home in a way. So it makes it difficult, like you said, that there's just a
Yeah.
tension and then like not tension and then that there's like kind of a conflict there, I guess, within generations.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes some people come from a country and it changes, but they still have the idea that the country is the same as when they left, and they might
Hmm.
have left 40 years ago
Hmm.
and when they were like 18, and didn't necessarily, and then as they've talked to immigrants their age here, all not having gone back or having gone back very little, they maybe form an idea that gets somewhat more and more away from what the culture ever was and certainly is now. But that's contrasted to the change that's happened in this culture. And there's a difference too. You use the word liberal. There's sometimes there's political words that have like a political meaning or usage and also cultural meaning and usage, which
Yeah.
goes together somewhat, but also is different somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. So like liberal has kind of a negative connotation, uh, at least with the culture I was exposed to. So it's kind of implied to mean like lack of virtue or values and things like that.
I don't want you to be free.
Yeah.
But there's also personal meanings, and sometimes, people can use things, especially maybe when we're criticizing and sometimes even start to get into villainizing things or
Mhm.
people. We can use words in a kind of in maybe an ungenerous way or much more narrow way.
Mhm.
But besides possibly Mulan, you can't think of any stories that might have
Uh,
influenced you or
let's see. I think maybe just like a lot of the stories of the Catholic saints that also influenced me a lot. Uh,
hagiographies.
yeah, I didn't know that word, so thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
I took the effort to learn that word and I jump at the chance to use it, like a lot of
mm,
obscure words a few that I still remember.
yeah, yeah. So those obviously like a lot of the times there is a sacrifice involved to follow God and just what doing what is right. So those I found those pretty inspirational. I'm trying to think of a saint maybe at the top of my head that I that maybe I could bring up. Um,
Yeah, I never learned any of those except for like very briefly Saint Francis of Assisi.
mhm. Yeah, I can't remember one I'm kind of
But they made a general
know so well.
impression of
But yeah, I
of
remember.
inspiration,
Hmm.
sacrifice.
Yeah. So those influenced me as well. And so yeah, there are saints, Mulan. Uh, yeah, I think maybe just seeing my parents too, because I noticed like they would just go without a lot of the time compared to like what they always made sure our needs were met. But then, for example, my dad would be like having two pairs of shoes that were like super worn out, and he'd be very stubborn about buying shoes for himself. Uh, so he wouldn't have them a lot, wouldn't have more a lot of the time. My mom was the same way.
So, like many immigrant families, also, you have the experience of from the time you were little to now, there being a huge economic difference,
Yeah,
huge financial difference. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I remember even though we didn't have a lot of money, like I never was in need of anything. Uh, so like whatever I needed, they would get it like promptly. And yeah, I just never went without somehow, which I find pretty, I didn't really think of it then, but now I think about it and that was pretty remarkable, I
Yeah.
guess, with
But
my
maybe
parents.
that's because that's not so much the story making you who you are now, but more like you in retrograde looking back and kind of rationalizing the feeling you have now and supporting that.
Yeah.
And then there was that one time you guys came home from a trip and there was that little blonde girl who had eaten your porridge and slept in your beds. I was trying to think if Goldilocks is about want and need in some way. So I was thinking of Hansel and Gretel,
Mhm.
I think, and how I wonder what stories maybe I can't think of any right now, but what stories we might come up with uh, from experiences that we have in our time. I mean, we mentioned maybe something that we, ungratitude or seeming ungratitude. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, what stories are kids raised with? Well, what stories were you raised with? I'm trying to think of what stories I was raised with. Obviously, Disney stories. I read
Mhm.
some. You mentioned the saints' biographies.
Mhm.
Maybe that kind of made a general impression of like you want to make you making you want to be a good person or something.
Mhm.
And also maybe kind of giving you some information because a lot of saints were quite the sinners before. I mean, I'm thinking of
Mhm.
Saint Augustine.
Yeah.
Of course, was he really that bad? I mean, there's this time where he and his friends like stole some fruit or something, and then he like was was devastated by that. But that maybe is more shows you just how sort of strict or pure his soul was that he would be so
Mhm.
affected by that, later on.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm trying to, do you think children's stories and movies over time have gotten more sort of self-centered, superficial, centered on sort of success story?
Mhm.
It's just the
Feel
the
that.
the only problem is like somebody or something is preventing you from achieving what you want, and that's never in question. I mean, what you want is never criticized, and it's just
Um, I feel like I've noticed a theme where a lot of stories now they're about realizing your own power or
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
it's like
unlocking your own inner power, some sort along those lines. Um,
yeah,
and I feel that's not necessarily always like a bad story or um,
sort of
but-
Rousseauian in some general way of like there's, you know, who you are is really really special. The trick is
Mhm.
just to realize that, and then maybe
Yeah,
that plays out in terms of superpowers or something like that
yeah. So
in
that
the
and kind
story.
of discouraging like changing yourself because like you said like you're kind of perfect the way you are and
Yeah,
it's always valid. That word's used a lot now. Your phrase, you're valid, or uh, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and we use
I
that in mental health too. Validate.
Mhm. Yeah.
In other words, to uh to show that someone's feelings or actions do not mean there is something flawed about them, uh, and so that they won't feel bad about those
Mhm.
actions,
Mhm.
especially perhaps shame is maybe the biggest emotion that is pushed out of the the realm of discourse. Like you should never feel shame, and
Mhm.
people will sometimes blame others for supposedly making them feel ashamed.
Mhm.
Well, what do you think about that?
Mhm. Yeah, I think like a lot of things nowadays, it's just gone too far in one kind of direction. So, um, yeah, I think it's just been kind of imbalanced and it's not encouraging like virtue anymore, but more like vice or just people like not self-developing more or kind of reflecting more on themselves in a way where they could maybe improve and develop virtue in a way. Uh
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean
like you
that word
said,
virtue sounds. Yeah, go ahead.
like everything you feel and think is correct. And you don't need to change it or challenge it.
Yeah, yeah, that word virtue sounds kind of old-fashioned even.
Yeah,
I don't really hear people use that word very much.
yeah. Yeah, and I feel like you say it now, people might think you're kind of stuck up or stuffy or arrogant or
Yeah,
something.
stuffy, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vice, is vice bad? Is there anything truly good or bad except to make someone feel bad? And well, I mean, we still believe like murder or rape or, I mean, really serious crimes are bad. But what about a good life? What is considered a good life besides self-actualizing glamour? Glamour, glory, but not military glory, but basking in attention, some kind of basking. It seems like some kind of basically becoming like a big pop star that makes everyone feel good about themselves and who make you feel good and rich.
Yeah, like I'm thinking a lot of also when you talk about when you say that about social media too. So like success as like a social media person is kind of glorified now as well. Uh
Yeah, the word influencer, which I don't like
yeah,
that word at all. But yeah, that's supposedly one of the top choices
yeah,
of American kids in a certain age range, right,
yeah,
for their future careers. I mean,
yeah. So like I guess the idea of good life now is being known and being seen.
being
Uh
famous,
yeah.
which is always something that's yeah, which is always something that people wanted, but
Mhm,
maybe weren't so exclusively seeking for, or maybe seeking that through something a little more indirect,
mhm,
some kind of great discovery or uh, some kind of achievement that brings you that rather than
mhm,
getting it directly
mhm,
for being yourself. I was going to say also, I mean, we do, people do believe, in general, do believe in maybe being an activist is a good thing, maybe like to help the environment or political activists, depends on
mhm,
what politics you adhere to. Um, yeah, but those are also influencing people.
mhm,
Maybe people believe that scientist is a good thing, like or like a climate scientist or like a medical scientist who helps discover cures for certain ailments or
mhm.
good treatments or something like that. But that doesn't strike a chord with me as something that's particularly even admired nowadays. I
Yeah.
don't know. But yeah, it seems like influencer. Uh, Elon Musk is a controversial figure, but he's very well liked by some people. And
Mhm.
I wonder how much of that is just because he's super rich rather than more because of his genius or, something like that.
Yeah. I think that and maybe someone who kind of goes against convention or lives unconventionally in some sort of way. Um,
He's been
like
admired
that
for a
gets
long time, and
attention.
has he been that way? Mm.
Yeah,
You mean in general?
yeah, in general.
Like, could you name a figure?
Well, I know that I feel like there's a lot, but one that sticks out in my mind is like there's a lady named Tess Holiday, and she's
Tennis
famous because
Holiday?
Tess Holiday, she's like a
Is that a real name?
supermodel. Yeah, I don't know if that's her real name or like her famous name, but her fame is because she's like morbidly obese, but still a supermodel.
Oh,
Um,
geez. Wow.
so yeah, she's been on covers and stuff, and
You're
things
saying
like
she's
that.
admired because she's doing it her way or doing it a different way,
Yeah, because she's going
partially.
against what a supermodel was supposed to be.
I see.
Um,
And how
so
much do you believe people really feel that way, or how much are they celebrating that for that reason to sort of, I don't know if it's virtue signal or something like that, to signal their,
I don't
to
know.
express a belief that that will get them social credit.
I think I heard it was kind of both. So she definitely created her own echo chamber on social media where people were also parodying that health at every size stuff you hear, that you can be healthy and fat and things like that. And
By the way, you're saying parroting, not parodying.
yeah,
You're
no,
you're
no
saying
parodying,
okay.
like kind of repeating the same stuff we heard with like that activism stuff.
Yeah.
So she created that, but then she also kind of had the people that were kind of grounded in reality, kind of criticizing her. Um,
Because of the health, not because
yeah,
of fame or that she was a supermodel.
no, I heard some arguments about what a supermodel is supposed to be. Uh, so yeah, there are definitely some people that were arguing that too. Um,
I wonder if
but
is it beautiful to some people? I mean, it definitely doesn't fit the Greek sort of proportions, but
I guess it was beautiful to some people because I've heard of men that are into that. So I guess that to them she was.
and
Um,
sometimes we use the word beautiful for something that's emotionally moving, like
yeah.
inspiring. It gives you a beautiful kind of inspiring light feeling.
Mhm.
So lightheadedness.
Yeah, so there's that. And then can't think of other people there, but there's always something like extreme about that person, like that that like gets a lot of attention now.
Yeah,
Or
I wonder how much of that
yeah,
is like social media and algorithms, how,
uh-huh.
yeah, things that activate the amygdala for because of
Yeah,
shock, and then people will send it because of that, or also because it doesn't take as much to digest such information, and so maybe people are more likely to slide it along to the next person
yeah,
through sharing.
yeah. It's like it kind of reminds me of like the freak shows that were popular
Mm.
in the past.
Oh,
Maybe it's
that's
like a
interesting.
modern version of freak
Yeah,
shows still.
that's interesting.
So maybe not necessarily anything new. But I guess with social media though, it's just like a lot more widespread than those shows probably ever were and easily accessible.
Yeah. So you're saying it's spectacle. There
Yeah,
is
spectacle.
probably something to that. I've never thought of that.
Yeah, and before the freak shows, there was the Colosseums, I guess, in ancient Rome or something.
Well, that's blood sport.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
also an
it's
interesting thing of the bread and circuses, or excuse me, bread and circuses. So there's also the public dole kind of mixed in there, sort of the uh you get different types of fare there.
mhm.
I would think that's a little different than the freak show. That I mean, there's
Yeah,
spectacle to it too, but that's actually seeing people risking their lives and
mm,
living, dying, and fighting skillfully, or there is something a
mhm,
little bit different with it being fighting and there being
mhm,
risk of death and
mhm,
actual death. And I don't know what to think of that. I have not actually seen someone kill another person. Most people haven't.
mhm,
But to see someone kill another person in entertainment, like I went at 4 o'clock and I saw two people fight, and one of them killed the other one.
mhm.
And I wonder if there was a ritual aspect to it. I don't. To me, it'd almost be slightly more excusable if they believed that there was some kind of symbolic meaning to that. Like where one I think there was a almost a parody of that, but yeah, where one of them would be acting in the spirit of one Greek god, Poseidon, and the other one is Odysseus or something, and they're reenacting the story of Poseidon's persecution of Odysseus, or Odysseus's defiance of Poseidon. I don't know. Yeah, I think it is interesting though to think about the symbolic meaning of actions and how they change. Symbolism changes the meaning of actions, especially those, involving life or death or transformation in life. Well, sort of like story maybe a little bit, but something else I wanted to bring up was, I think I talked to you uh, offline about the sort of the problem or the idea of Alcibiades in Plato, the in Plato's Symposium. He appears at the end, and he was a real life character who was sort of a real life person who was, I think, involved with the tyranny in Athens after they lost the Peloponnesian War with Sparta, and their democracy was destroyed. Anyway, he was looked at as kind of a bad historical figure, but he had some association with Socrates, and that was one of, I guess, the reasons or the charges or something that they brought against Socrates. But anyway, in the symposium, Plato presents Alcibiades as a gifted young man who's, by his own account, moved to tears, hearing Socrates speak of virtue and all these high things and everything, and he wants to become a good person. But then, when he's away from Socrates, he's moved by the desire to be popular. And so, you and I talked about this sort of problem of what makes people want to become good, you know. And with Alcibiades, you have someone who is very gifted, who is able to understand good teaching, who has a very, presumably one of the best teachers of history, one who deeply knows the subject matter and is also to very convincingly, who is able to very convincingly transmit that to people, as evidenced by Alcibiades' tears and his resolution when he hears the teaching. But yet, and not only that, Alcibiades has self-knowledge. He uh, he knows that it is the desire for popularity, assuming that's it, which and that sounds very plausible, that draws him away from following this teaching. So it seems like you have everything that's needed to become good, but and he's privileged. He doesn't have to he's not in some kind of compromised situation. He doesn't have to do backbreaking labor all the time. I mean, not that that's a reason that someone should become bad or something, but it's just that presumably could influence them or prevent one of the other uh, aspects to influence them. So anyway, yeah, we talked about that. I mean, what do you think causes people to be good?
Mhm. I'm, yeah, I didn't really have thoughts on that. As you were speaking, I was kind of thinking more about what makes it hard to be good or what kind of makes it hard for people to kind of do that. But yeah, I guess I'll go first though with what I think makes people good. Mm. Oh, it's very difficult because you can do a lot of things to point that way was a child, but sometimes even like doing that doesn't result in a good person. But I'd say maybe a lot of it is upbringing still for people.
And what about
Uh,
upbringing makes someone good or want to be good? Which those are two maybe separate
yeah,
things.
yeah, or I'd say maybe more accurately, it's something that could influences people to be good because it doesn't work on everyone. But I would say just teaching, like we talked about, stories of like that, kind of impart values and
Do you mean
good
I
things
mean
to people.
they impart values, but also they inspire
Yeah, and inspire.
people to be like that because yeah, presumably the good thing is often the more difficult thing, the thing that
Hmm.
takes longer, etc., presume than the bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always say those kinds of stories. Um, and we've talked about it a lot too, but some sort of belief system or religion um, helps with that as well.
How so?
Well, I think religion is kind of similar to stories where they kind of also inspire and provide people with like sets of principles to abide by for what makes a good life according to that religion.
Yeah, it seems it's familiar to you. It's available as an
Yeah,
option if you've been taught it and have it in your memory.
yeah,
Although
and
the question is whether that stuff will come back to you in
mhm,
pivotal moments.
yeah, yeah. And while the details kind of differ, like most religions kind of have the same basic principles of, like minimizing your harm to yourself and others, and kind of going by the golden rule. Uh, so I
Yeah.
think that as well. Um, but yeah, do you have more ideas?
Well, one thing that I was thinking of is one thing that we could talk about is thing that I'm interested in is how much do people really want to know the truth?
Mhm.
You know, I mean, virtue would you agree that virtue does involve some self-knowledge? Like I should say, being a virtuous person involves some knowledge, having some knowledge of yourself.
Yeah, well, I think yeah, it involves work because you have to. I think a lot of virtue is like a kind of a work in progress or something you develop in time. So you would have to recognize when you weren't being so virtuous, I think, to maybe kind of develop it more
So
and notice things in yourself.
you can grade yourself. Like,
Yeah.
uh, maybe I thought maybe I'm being a certain level of disciplined or something like that.
Yeah.
But actually, this is easy for me. So it's not really very admirable. So maybe I can be more disciplined. And
Mhm.
from that awareness, I can become more virtuous.
Mhm. Yeah, that and there's a lot of self-reflection too, because you think back, wow, like I wasn't that great of a person in that instance. Um, so I'll try now to be better when
You
this
have to see
happens again.
yourself from the outside as just
Yeah.
another person doing the actions or saying the words that you said and judge yourself as you would judge
Hmm.
another person doing those
Yeah.
actions or saying those words.
Yeah. So just a lot of self-awareness and introspection involved.
Yeah, but I guess if you take this self-awareness plus experience, memory, judgment, and some kind of system of virtues, then maybe you go from those things and you can call that self-knowledge if you combine all those things in memory.
Hmm.
But that might also, you might judge yourself to be rather lackluster. Uh, that's possible in terms of virtue, and perhaps someone doesn't want to know that.
Mhm. Oh, so you
So,
mean like maybe like self-knowledge doesn't always influence people to go that direction of like trying to be more virtuous? Is that what you mean?
we can go with that if you want to, yeah.
Oh,
But I guess I just mean, yeah, I uh, instead of talking about that, I'm just curious, yeah, whether you think that people really want to know the truth. What if you were the emperor with no clothes? And let's say you could live a life where no one ever said anything. There wasn't the little boy who hadn't been socialized, correctly in that society. And no one ever told you you didn't have clothes. And you can live your entire life and then die uh being however you wanted to be, which is maybe what that story is saying without any negative input. Do you think people would want to live that way?
you mean like most people or
Mm-hmm.
what most people would like to do?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. I feel that's hard for me to kind of judge. Uh, Still feel it be like a mixed bag of what people would prefer. Mm.
Yeah, certainly different people would prefer different things.
Yeah, but do you think like as a whole, like people don't want to know the truth in general? Or
I mean, people definitely want to be in contact with the truth. There is never a situation where the emperor with no clothes would not have a little boy that would laugh at him. Um, so for that reason alone, for their shame, for fear of humiliation, people want to be in some contact with the truth. But would you want, on the other hand, would you want everyone to know everything? No. Is that because of what they would do to attack you, your fear for your personal safety or your
Mhm.
ego? Yes. But I guess what I'm thinking of more than that is, yeah, for people to know deeper truths that maybe imply how small one is in the universe. So
Mhm.
maybe the opposite of these success sort of stories that we're talking about, where you're not the hero in the story. In fact, you're barely a minor character in the story. I mean, isn't that the truth of the universe, of the cosmos, Very few of us are like monumental geniuses that change the course of history. Most of us are rather insignificant. And do most people want to know that? I would say on the one hand, no. We like our illusions, and part of our illusions or perceptions or just experience is that the people around us consider us much more valuable than we would be considered at large. On the other hand, I think so that would be people don't want to know that kind of truth. But on the other hand, experience of people who have incredible mystical experiences while not on psychedelics, maybe supposedly they have, yeah, amazing experiences where they realize, interesting word, the how small they are, how insignificant they are. That's, you can say, it's something like, yeah, a tiny soul realizing how small it is in therefore how large God is, something like that, if you want to use theological language, sort of. And that is liberating. That is that is a great, joyous, wonderful experience, and that can change their life from then on too. But maybe that's a lot.
Yeah, it's what I could kind of see is not so much people not wanting to know the truth, but kind of like at what you said, kind of they have an idea that they could like go along with what with a lie, like on a some sort of mass level. Uh, like I could
If
see
you
that happen.
suspect it's a lie, though, doesn't that make your life seem like fraudulent?
Yeah, but I think like what you said though, you brought up like people having fear or of not going along, and I feel like fear is like a strong motivator. Uh, so maybe as long as people like feel they're just staying safe, that that maybe it's like worth it's still kind of worth it to people. Uh,
I think I sense that there is a desire for truth though, but yeah, maybe it has to come in stages or something.
because I don't know, sometimes I have the thought of, wow, it'd be more stress for you to be ignorant. But and maybe I think that's something a lot of people have. So yeah, I think
I
maybe
mean,
for like a certain, huh?
what do you mean?
Sorry, what?
What do you mean?
Oh, I mean, as in to be ignorant, as in to not know, like, uh,
You said it'd be more
what's
stressful
going
to
on.
be ignorant.
No, it'd be less stressful.
Oh, less stressful to be
Yeah,
ignorant.
yeah,
Well, aren't you saying that people want their illusions?
yeah, pretty much. Or, or just that it's more comfortable a lot of the time. Uh, so even if they kind of have that niggling feeling in the back of their mind, I feel people can often just ignore it or
Yeah,
just
but I don't
pretend
think
it's not
someone can
there.
be happy. I don't think someone can be ultimately happy that way. I think people
Yeah,
desire some kind of authenticity. And of course, we tend to use that word in terms of just self-expression, but I
yeah,
think a better authenticity is more like something about being in touch with reality
mhm,
and sort of, I don't know,
yeah,
expressing that reality. Sort of the opposite of the emperor with no clothes, where
yeah,
you're the emperor that acts as he really is
mhm,
and knows who he really is and what he really is. He plays that
yeah,
role well.
yeah. I'm thinking of the Buddha when he was the prince, just wanting to know the truth of what the outside world was.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that seems like a good analogy. Yeah, even when a human being is given everything, they suspect something, yeah. Or according to the mythical story, at least once he sees things that indicate to him the reality of real life, like a sick person, a dead person, an old person, then he's curious. Yeah, this seems like a really good story to bring up, that at least once he's exposed to some things about reality, he no longer wants to live the this amazing, rich fantasy life. Okay. Well, let's see what reality brings us for the next week.
yeah.
Okay.